Hi, this is Randall here in Texas.
And I'm Matt, here in Michigan. Today, Randall and I are taking a look back at 1995's Heat. Now, normally Randall and I go through the cast, and I'll tell you, this cast is long and some big names in this cast. But instead of taking half the review to go through the whole cast, I'm actually just going to give you the three actors who are on, I would say, the DVD box of this. It stars Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Val Kilmer. It's written and directed by Michael Mann, who also directed The Last of the Mohegans, Collateral, and Public Enemies. Now, before we go any further, if you like this review, be sure to give us a like. Also, be sure to hit subscribe and ring that bell to get notifications on our latest videos.
In Heat, we see top-tier thief Neil McCauley, portrayed by Robert De Niro, as he leads a band of organized criminals. They are pursued by Lieutenant Vincent Hanna, portrayed by Al Pacino, before they can make their greatest score yet. It had a $60 million budget and made $187 million at the box office. It is very well liked by critics and audiences. It is based on the real-life criminal Neil McCauley and detective Chuck Adamson. Several scenes portrayed in the film actually happen in real life, including the very infamous coffee shop scene. It was filmed entirely on location, no sound stages, which is very odd for just about any film, and much to most people's surprise, given their long history in film, this was the very first time that we had ever seen Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in the same movie, much less sharing screen time. Matt, Heat is obviously very influential, but looking back on it, what did you think of it?
Alright, well, first confession to make, first time watching Heat. I did not watch Heat, though I admit I did always see like the cover of the VHS whenever you go to like the library or the video store. That cover always resonated with me, so that's something that was always in my mind about that.
What's a VHS?
But what's a VHS? What is that?
What is that?
You put in your tape, and then it'll like play music, right?
But Heat, to me, it's a really good movie, though I don't know if it's quite my type of movie. For me, it was a little bit too long, and generally, there was quite a few storylines going on for me or whatever. To me, I would have liked the pacing a little bit better, but I can look at the movie and see that it was really well put together, and the acting was really well in this movie. Big name actors. But for me, I would say, yeah, it's a good film.
I agree. I do think it's a little overlong. The movie goes in places that it doesn't necessarily need to, storyline wise. We're like, it's not that it's not important to like potentially these characters, but sometimes we just see scenes where you're trying to make us feel something for the bad guys, the thieves, or you're trying to make us feel something for the good guys, the cops in this case. It's those scenes that you don't necessarily need. They don't really add to the story, but they don't hurt it either. And that's interesting. Like we all know that the detective, in this case, Al Pacino's detective's life is falling apart around him. We don't really need a scene where his wife is literally shown committing adultery with another person. It's just an overly long scene. You don't need it, basically. There's a whole bunch of scenes like that in this film. It could have been shorter. It could have been tighter. I think if it were made today, it probably would be. But that being said, I still really, really enjoyed the film for what it was trying to get across. This like idea of everyone has private lives. Cops have private lives. Bad guys have private lives. And what they do on a daily basis can certainly start affecting those private lives.
Oh yeah, totally. And that's the point I was hitting on. I mean, this is kind of like a crime movie, where, but it's really looking at like relationships and stuff, couples and thing, and how much they prioritize that relationship or not. I mean, that's kind of like a growing, a continuous theme throughout this one. Like, are those relationships being put on the back burner? Also shows on how trying to keep those relationships going also pushes people, I guess, to commit crime. I wouldn't say that the relationship necessarily, makes them do crime, but if for people that feel like they can't do anything else, they continue to do like crime, what they think is like the only thing they really know how to do well in order to keep those relationships going. So it's kind of interesting that we have all these different like relationship dynamics, but to me I think maybe there was maybe too many, and that kind of added to the length a little bit. I mean, we could have really just focused on maybe like two or three, looking at like how Pacino looks at relationships, and how De Niro looks at relationships, and maybe like Val Kilmer. But then we also look at a lot of other people's relationships and stuff too, and how what they're doing affects them. And to me, it just was a bit too long to like fully enjoy. But I still like looking at a lot of this film and notice that it was pretty well done.
Yeah, I agree. There's, because the cast is so extensive, like you pointed out, and it's kind of a blink and you'll miss someone. Like, oh my gosh, Danny Trejo's in this. All right, that's good. There's it's all over the place. This cast. But they do go maybe a bit far into, okay, well, here's Tom Sizemore's character, and he's got a wife and and everything going on. It's like I don't really need to know that. And then ultimately, some of those characters end up being throwaway characters in a sense, and that's kind of disappointing too. You're like, okay, you built something up and then you threw it away, and well, I didn't get a payoff, and well, viewers don't like it when they don't get payoffs. So that happens in this, and I wish they had just concentrated on the mastermindery, like the cop, the like really smart cop versus the really smart criminal, like going at each other and trying to outwit each other. That's the storyline that I was more interested in, even though there's all this other family dynamic stuff going on.
Me, another kind of talking on like these big and actors and stuff that we have in this film, I think it kind of hurt the film a little bit for me too, because I had a hard time like really just looking at these as like characters. I was looking more like, oh, that's Al Pacino. Oh, that's Robert De Niro. Oh, that's Ashley Judd kind of thing. And so at the time of this movie, a lot of them big stars, but some of them, varying levels of stardom, even though like now almost all of them are like really big stars. But there's like two characters that, the actors I didn't know as well. And I think that really helped me really see their characters as opposed to like seeing them as actors. And that is the character Justine and Wangro. They're kind of like different characters. Like Justine is the one person that really felt like a real human, like a real person kind of in this movie. But to me, like her struggles and like her problems and different things that she looks at life kind of actually felt like a real person. And Wangro, man, he definitely seems like the dirty double crossing, villain. I don't know, not say villain, but bad guy kind of in the thing of the movie. Like he really messes stuff up at the beginning, and one of those characters that Robert De Niro's going after there at the end.
It's interesting. I didn't quite get that feeling where it was like, oh, there's so many stars in this, I can only really see the stars. I thought Robert De Niro does a pretty good job in this, because usually you expect someone like Robert De Niro to not play the bad guy. You expect him to play a good guy, or at the very least, like a complicated character, which this is a pretty complicated character. So I didn't have that problem. I guess maybe a little bit with Al Pacino, I didn't buy into it. I have it noted down, which is really fun. The character that Al Pacino plays is a violent crimes detective. He goes sees like the worst sides of humanity, basically. Every day he'll see murders, gruesome, violent murders. And you had just said Wingro's character. If it weren't for him, none of this happens. The entire movie premise doesn't get kicked off because they're bank thieves. They rob things. Wingro's character comes and just starts shooting people, and that brings in Al Pacino's character, a violent crimes detective who would have never otherwise have been assigned to the case. And that sets off everything. So yeah, Wingro's character, pretty important.
And Waygro's character's also that, callous or whatever for like the end where we see, Robert De Niro's like true character. Because we're kind of wondering like, well, is he just gonna go off, into the sunset, be home free? nope, he can't. He's got to go and kill Waingro. Throws it all away to that, and we get the whole thing that we like foreshadowed and saw before. That 30-second or whatever it is rule, or
Have no attachments. Allow nothing to be in your life that you cannot walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you spot the heat around the corner.
Robert De Niro does. He has that choice. He could have just tried to get in the car and stuff and go, but instead he ran away from the heat. So yeah, I mean, he's a big integral part of this movie.
And you wouldn't think it, honestly. He doesn't spend a whole bunch of time on screen, but without him, the entire premise of the movie, including the end that you just pointed out, just doesn't happen. He's completely integral to the plot, even as he's a throwaway character where I'm perfectly okay with him being a throwaway character. Because you didn't try and get me to fall in love with him. Nah, he's a bad guy. Period. End of story, And still important to everything that happens.
One thing about this movie that I enjoy, but also at the same time kind of takes me out of the film, is some of I guess you'd say the action scenes, like the shootout scenes, and it kind of makes me question a little bit of our I don't know if you want to say hero characters or whatever, our good guys. We have these shootouts in really crowded areas with a lot of people, and yes, it makes for good action, a lot of movement and stuff too. But at the same time, too, I kind of question, the cops, do they really care about, collateral? If, are they really keeping people safe by having these shootouts with our bank robbers or whatever at the time in, these public settings? So it makes me kind of rethink, Al Pacino's character. It's so are they trying to say that really all that he cares about is, getting the bad guy? And isn't really as big on, innocent lives getting killed? Maybe I'm looking into that too much, but kind of took me out a little bit. Especially when the one bad guy is holding the child, and Al Pacino, I mean, I can't remember exactly what kind of gun it was. It almost seemed like it was a shotgun. Probably not a shotgun.
Oh no,
just fired to blow him away.
It's a rifle,
or whatever.
Yeah. He's got a assault rifle, yeah.
He's got an assault rifle or whatever. I'm thinking from that distance and stuff too. That kind of took me a little bit out of the film.
Number one, I'll defend the characters. They weren't trying to get into a shootout. They just came packing for a shootout, okay? The idea was to try and sneak up on them in the car before they leave and avoid a shootout, but then a shootout ensues, when they're spotted, unfortunately. The bad guys shoot first in the film. That's what I'm trying to say. But simultaneously, yes, Al Pacino's character, you do get this feeling of everything else has fallen apart in his life. His true love and everything that he stands for is really just getting the bad guy. Winning the battle of wits with this guy and hey, if you do this, I'll take you down, basically. I think that's part of what they want you to get with this character is his callous disregard for everything else. So I don't think you're really reading into it too much, in all honesty.
Well, I'm kind of trying to look into it a little bit too when we have that moment. I already mentioned how Robert De Niro's character, he has that moment where he can make a decision on if he wants to keep doing what he's doing or he can go around and, quote unquote, have happiness. Al Pacino's character also kind of has that moment too where he has that decision when he's at the hospital right after, Natalie Portman's character, tried to commit suicide in the tub. It's kind of there shows a need, that he could do some good, kind of help out, this family kind of thing. But he makes the decision too that, his real drive is to go after Robert De Niro, to get the bad guy and stuff too. And, kind of before, they kind of played off as he's, protecting lives and stuff. But really, it's that drive, what drives him is the chase, the hunt kind of thing, regardless of what other things that goes into it.
The reason I think that you aren't reading too much into it is he's a violent crimes cop, like I had said, detective, and he's perfectly okay with getting tips and leads from a chop shop, and his close associate or brother or cousin or whatever runs a chop shop over in Vegas, something like that, and it's yeah, whatever, that's not his department. He doesn't care, doesn't care. I'll work with that. I'll work with that known criminal, if it gets what I need, basically. So that is 100% part of his character. Okay? Now, whether or not that's 100% part of the real life character, I don't know. The real life person. But in this context of this film, it's like, yes, nothing is more important than winning the battle. Which, if you've seen the film, I mean, it's 1995, guys. I can't get into spoilers about a 1995 film. He wins. He gets the upper hand. Al Pacino wins in the end. Robert De Niro's character, he cannot walk away. He can't give in. He shows his true colors are he's driven by revenge, basically, and wants to also, be the top dog. And at the end of the day, these two characters colliding, it's pretty fun to watch on screen, even though they share just like a tiny amount of time on screen, actually.
And I kind of want to go back to that scene that you were talking about too in the coffee shop and too, based on an actual event or whatever, actual meeting between them. That puts the whole movie in just like a little bit of a nutshell, like the conversation, like each one, like Pacino and De Niro, like here, this is who we are, and this is how our decisions affect our relationships. And they even like foreshadow how it's gonna end. It's gonna end with them boxed in, and it's gonna be either one or the other. And they both said, "Hey, neither one of us will hesitate." So I think it's interesting that this one scene is basically like a small part of like the whole movie, which I think is really cool. To me, I think that's the best scene in the film. Even though when I was watching it, it kind of felt like a little bit different than the rest of the movie. But yeah, I think that one scene, the whole movie's built around.
I'm personally, I've watched it once. This is my second time watching it. It's still good. I do wish it were shorter, and I do wish maybe that we could tighten up the storylines to really focus on our two primary casts, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, and let them have more time to like actually see each other.
Yep, I totally agree with you 100%. The same feelings. I see a lot of good things in this movie. I mean, I think it is a good movie, but yeah, it's a bit too long for me, and things take a little bit more, I guess, to like develop and stuff. And we go to like other storylines and stuff too that I think really could have been tightened up. So yes, Randall, 100% with you on that. Of course, Randall and I want to know what you guys think about Heat. Let us know in the comments below. Also, be sure to go to our YouTube channel to check out some of our other reviews. We have new movie reviews, flashback movie reviews, take a look at some TV series, and we also have deeper dive discussions.
Also, don't forget to go check us out on Facebook. We post the day before what's coming up next on YouTube. We also post some of things from our other fandoms over there as well. If you don't want to bother with us on Facebook, no problem. Be sure to put us on your schedules. We post new videos every Monday and Thursday. For now, I'm Randall here in Texas. See everyone next time.
And I'm Matt here in Michigan. Have a good day, everyone. Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.